Aloha, everyone. I'm Deni.
I'm Fede.
And we're so happy to play for y'all tonight and be a part of this conversation. Okay. The first song we're going to do is called Dreamer. And I wrote it out in Kipahulu, where we live. And Fede put chords to it. And it's about it's just about not giving up on your dreams and not letting your dreams give up on you. Yeah. I was born a dreamer, but then I became a sleeper, and all my dreams vanished into clouds. It became easier to think than to feel. My head began to speak, but my heart stayed quiet. I heard a voice that was not mine, that tumbled through my throat while I choked. And I can feel life moving all around me, but where is the life moving inside of me? Where am I? Oh, where am I? 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 Dreams come home to me. Dreams don't give up on me. Dreams I need you to see. I need you to see. Come to me, come to me, come home to me. Come to me, come to me, come home to me. Come to me, come to me, come home to me. Dreams come home to me. I am waiting here for you. I am waiting here for you. You guys, can you hear us okay? Does the sound good? Okay, cool. The next song we're going to do, you all know, so feel free to sing along on your end of the computer or phone. And this song, actually, I was singing it every morning just for myself for months with my dog Leo, who he'd put his face like in the guitar, and he'd be with me, when I sang it, and I always think of him. And he passed away in August, and I loved him very much. So yeah, this song is for all those who we've lost, who we love, and life is not always easy, but we got to keep going. So yeah. I heard there was a secret chord that David played, and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Well, your faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty in the moonlight overthrew you. But she tied you to the kitchen chair, she broke your throne, she cut your hair, and from your lips she drew the hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Well, you say I took the name in vain, but I don't even know the name. And if I did, well, really, what's it to you? And there's a blaze of light in every word. It doesn't matter which you've heard, the holy or the broken. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Well, I did my best, it wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. I've told the truth, I didn't come to fool you. And even though it all went wrong, I stand before the Lord a song with nothing on my lips but hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. The next one we're gonna do, thank you, Katie, is called Sanctuary, and I wrote it out here in Kipahulu too. And I think we've all had moments where we don't maybe feel the safest in ourselves. So it's about, how to find that safety within ourselves, which doesn't always seem to be easy. Where is my sanctuary? Is it out there somewhere? Where is my sanctuary? Is it out there somewhere? I thought I found it within myself, but it's not safe there anymore. I thought I found it within myself, but it's not safe there anymore. I tried to meditate like Buddha, but I couldn't see the light. I tried to meditate like Buddha, but I couldn't see the light. If I can't find peace within myself, where else could it be? If I can't find peace within myself, where else could it be? If I can't find peace within myself, where else could it be? Okay, so our last song is called I Love Air, and it is a poem written by Josh Stern, who started Lalima Farms out here, who passed away in 2019. I'm sure many of you knew him. And if you didn't, well, he was a wonderful man, and he's still here with us today. And he's gonna come out now in these words that are his. Yeah, and he really loved the earth and just cared so deeply about our planet and Kipahulu, and so I hope that we can continue to honor him in taking care of this place. Yeah. And all of you, and all of you, and all of you too, and all of us, and all of them, share it over and over again. And all the people on far off lands, and all of the little creatures that live in the sand, we all share this air we love. We are watching blow around above. I love air. I love air. I love air. I love air. La 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 la. So I beg of all of us and all of them, all of you and all of me, let's not pollute. Let's let air be. It's always there for the songs we've sung, and it's always there to fill my lungs. So with this breath, the one thing I would like to share with all of you is air. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid. That breath of air I only saved for long enough to make a trade. Some gases go in while others go out, making love to the air is what I'm talking about. So it's time to stand up and make a shout. I love air. I love air. I love air. I love air. La 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 la. And yes, it's true, I will admit, I am completely addicted to it. And yes, it's true, so are all of you. I love air.
was amazing, you guys. Thank you so much.
Again for having us. And I just wanted to add one thing that I said, Josh wrote that poem and we then turned it into a song and sang it at his memorial. So I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you so much, Deni and Fede. Can feel the sweet spirit of Kipuhulu coming through your music, and just really appreciate you guys sharing, sharing Josh's spirit and just sharing the beauty of Kipuhulu with us all this evening. And just thanks everybody for joining us for the 35th speaker series for the HFUU. As Katie said, I'm Scott with the Hana chapter, and I'm happy to sort of host the meeting this evening with Jay and Jenni. And just a little bit of background, I first sort of became aware of the Maui Nui Seabird Recovery Project when we happened to find a wounded juvenile koa'e kea floating in the large fish pond out in Hana, in Hamoa, and we're like, what do we do with this? And looked up on the web and found a link that, found a thing that said, find a bird, call here, and ended up, getting in touch with
Oh no. He'll come back.
What bird populations were there, or the potential for bird. That's a project that we're still working on, and I'm fortunate to have just sort of learned about their work through that. And I think that yeah, pardon me if I break up a little bit. That's our Hana internet this time of evening. Thanks Spectrum. But some folks may ask, like, what does seabirds have to do with agriculture? This is an agriculture organization, and when I was talking with Jay and Jenni, and kind of learning about this, they shared some facts with me about the origin of soils in Hawaii that kind of blew my mind and made me realize that seabirds are very relevant for Hawaii agriculture, and that as you'll learn this evening, it's a very relevant topic. And so I think it's great for the farmers on Maui to learn about the origins of our soils. This organization is all about soil health and soil regeneration, and I think it's important that we appreciate the bird's role in where the soil came from in the first place. So to introduce Jenni and Jay, Jenni's a research ecologist and has worked in many different fields and environments. She's been the operations GIS specialist for Maui Seabird Recovery Project for around 6 years, where she manages data and reporting and research and monitoring activities. Before dedicating herself to seabird conservation, Jenni researched soil nutrient cycling and insect-plant interactions in diverse agrisystems around the globe. And Jay has a background in bird ecology and worked in some other areas, including around San Francisco, marine bird observatory. And then he's been working as under the Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit of the University of Hawaiʻi, managing the Maui Nui Seabird Recovery Project since 2006. And so with that, we're really happy to have Jay and Jenni on this evening to share about the Maui Nui Seabird Recovery Project. And you guys can just come on and introduce yourself and take it away with your presentation, and then we'll have some questions and answer time afterwards. So welcome, Jay and Jenni.
Great, thanks, Scott. We're really glad to be here to do this, and let's see if I can get this shared now. There we go. Can you see my screen? Everybody got it?
Says your
Without the
screen
note?
sharing. It says your screen sharing, but I don't see a slide yet.
Oh, goodness. What does that
It says
mean?
double click to enter full screen mode. No, yeah,
No.
that's me.
Huh. It worked when we tried it out before. What's going on now? Try that again. Let's see. Here we go. Share. Now what do we have?
There we go.
Can you, what do you see though?
Your PowerPoint. So yeah, play from start and then you, or
Yeah. All right. Now we got it.
Yep, there we go.
No notes, just the show.
Yep.
Very good. Aloha. And thank you for inviting us to share with you about the marvelous creatures that we are so fortunate to be able to study and protect and manage. Maui Nui Seabird Recovery Project is a project of the University of Hawaiʻi, Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit, Research Corporation, University of Hawaiʻi, and Pacific Rim Conservation. We work closely with and agents of the state of Hawaiʻi, Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife, Dr. David Duffy at UH Manoa and Dr. Patrick Hart at UH Hilo are our principal investigators. Many of you may have known Dr. Fern Duval, who passed away unexpectedly this year. He was responsible for hiring me to manage this project in 2006. He served as mentor and scientific advisor and is sorely missed. Now, Manu Kai have lived in Hawaii for some 70 million years, as far as we can tell. That long ago, of course, we had no extant records of the birds present, but we do know that they were the ancestors of our current seabird fauna. When these birds visited the islands, they would have found a barren lava landscape. The lava was subjected to the same erosive forces that we experience today: wind, waves, and rain. As each island of the archipelago rose out of the sea from the hotspot that is now where Hawaii Island is, and the undersea volcano Kameʻehua Kanaloa, they began their journey west and north. The map on the right shows where the current hotspot and Hawaii Island, that is less than 1 million years old. 5 million years ago, what we now call Kauai was rising from that hotspot. And about 70 million years ago, what is the oldest seamount was a high island like Hawaii, where Hawaii Island is today. As they travel, they are worn down by wind, waves, and rain, and are actually sinking into the mantle of the earth due to their extreme weight. Now, Manu Kai have been contributing members of the archipelago ecosystem since they first began breeding on the islands, on what is now the northernmost emperor seamount. Their marine-derived nutrients, bought and distributed as guano, combined with the mineral lava soils to form the rich soils in which our unique Hawaiian plant community evolved. Seabird guano also nourishes coral reef communities, and these ecosystems slow the inevitable erosion of the terrestrial by the sea. We have 24 species of seabirds breeding in Ko Hawaii Pai'aina. The vast majority of them remain in Papahanaumokuakea. Numbers in parentheses on this slide are total worldwide numbers of species. In the order Charadriformes, the family Laridae, we have no gulls. A most common misidentification of seabirds is to label any seabird a seagull. In Maui County, we have 12 breeding seabird species. 5 are procelarids, nesting in burrows or crevices. We have 2 tropic birds, often recognized easily by their long paired central tail feathers. We now have 4 sulids, or as the Hawaiians called all of them. Brewster's brown booby arrived just last year, and we now have the only known colony outside of Central and South America. Our only current larid is the Noyo. Many of you likely know them from the offshore islet at Wainapanapa. A quick introduction to some of our Namanukai. Moli may start breeding here, and we are working to provide places for them as rising sea level inundates their current breeding atolls and islands in Papahanaumokuakea. Here you can see the neres on either side of the bill. There is a gland at the base of these that removes the salt that the birds get from seawater from their blood. When we recovered down seabirds, we never give them fresh water. As in as short as 1 week, the salt removing gland can atrophy permanently. Kaupu also primarily nest in Papahanaumokuakea, and we look forward to welcoming them to the high islands. Translocations are already being done to Oahu. Ua'u are said to have been the most numerous birds in the islands, obscuring the sky when they return to their burrows at night. This information comes from the subfossil record studies done by researchers with the Smithsonian Institution. Today, Ua'u are on the endangered species list, and their largest remaining colonies are on Haleakala Summit. They are also still found under Uluhe fern between 2,000 and 7,000 feet on Maui. The second largest colony was rediscovered on Lanai by this project in 2006. Today, Pulama Lanai is building an approximately 80-acre predator-proof fenced area for the protection of a portion of that colony. A'o are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. In Maui Nui, we considered them endangered. The only known burrows are in the predator-proof enclosures at Makamaka'ole and Mauna Kahalavai. Akeake are also endangered. We are trying to use social attraction to draw them into the seabird enclosures at Makamaka'ole. These birds fit in the palm of your hand, but they, like their much larger cousins, understand the moods of Kanaloa. They live at sea through all kinds of weather. They are well adapted to living over the sea. Ua'ukani are probably the most well-known of our seabirds. They nest on the shorelines and offshore islets, so are more easily seen and heard. Their moaning cries on their colonies have been referred to as crying babies. We have a long-term mark recapture study of these birds underway. Many Maui residents and visitors have joined us for daytime chick banding in the fall and adult recaptures at night in the spring. This chick is too small to band. We give them stainless steel bling on their right leg about a month before they fledge, so we can track them throughout their lives. Here is the annual cycle for the Ua'u. Ua'ukani and Akeake have similar time budgeting. All go through arrival and courtship, pre-laying exodus, egg laying, incubation, hatching, chick provisioning, and then departure of adults and fledging of chicks. In February to March, they return to the colony and nest at night. They come back to where they fledged from for the most part. Males identify a burrow and sit at the entrance calling, while females choose the mate they think best. They mate for life, 35 to 40 years, either with a new mate or reunited established pairs. They attend to burrow, preen each other, utter quiet love murmurings, and copulate. After a few weeks, they go to sea for about a month to eat. Raising a chick takes a lot of energy, so they have to bulk up, especially the wahine. For the egg she will lay is 18% of her body weight. Perhaps an easier way to understand just how big that is relative to her size is to consider a 100-pound woman having a child 18% of her body weight. It would weigh 18 pounds. When she lays that egg, she goes to sea to build back with fresh fish and squid. The kane will either be there when she lays the egg, or he will be back within 3 days to start incubation. Once incubation starts, it has to be constant. One parent always on the egg. He takes longer incubation shifts so she can continue to feed to build her strength for chick feeding. In addition to fish and squid, when the chick gets water from, the adults digest food to an oil as they fly about foraging. They store this oil in their stomach and feed it to the chick after the fresh food. The caloric value of this oil is 9 times that of fresh fish and squid. We did tracking of chick provisioning adults in 2006, 07, and 08 from Haleakala and Lanai to learn where they travel to find food. We deployed satellite tags in cooperation with USGS and US Fish and Wildlife Service. This is a typical foraging trip to feed the chick in the burrow. We had no idea that the birds would fly with a quartering tailwind all the way around the North Wawanakuakea. This route takes them into the much more productive area of the ocean, and they go and return with the support of the wind. In 2011, 12, and 13, we had deployed GPS trackers on chick provisioning Ua'ukani. We learned that they forage in very different areas from Oahu. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management had funded USGS to lead a statewide study of the intraseasonal and intercolony differences in foraging behavior among Ua'ukani. These track lines are from birds at Hawaii and Ho'okipa. In addition to identifying the birds' foraging areas, this work is also crucial to our understanding of the risks to our seabirds from proposed offshore energy developments. Chicks outweigh adults by as much as 100 grams or more before they fledge. When they fledge, they are fully grown. Fledglings may still have down, but are otherwise almost indistinguishable from adults. If you have ever spent any time in a seabird colony of any size, you know as well as these two folks that guano does indeed happen. Jenni will now take you on further exploration of the truly fantastic role that seabirds and their guano have played throughout history and the role that they continue to play, benefiting both terrestrial habitats and nearshore coral reef habitats.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I'm very grateful to be here speaking with everyone today, and very grateful for the wonderful music that we had to start everything off. So if there's any problems with the screen share, just let me know, but I'm assuming everything's going well. So yes, I'm going to talk about guano mostly, and how seabirds are considered ecosystem engineers. So what we mean by saying that they're ecosystem engineers is just that they are a major player in particularly in their terrestrial breeding habitat. So just by their presence and their activities there, they're going to alter the environment. And it's perhaps most obvious in terms of the physical environment. So this is a picture of Moli, or Laysan albatross, that I took on Midway Atoll. And you can see the nesting moli on the surface of the ground here. They build up their nest platforms, and they also will prune and harvest the vegetation. So they do cause a lot of changes. Oops. Okay. And depending on the species of seabird, they may have different behaviors, and some species do burrow, as Jay mentioned. And this here's a picture of a very dense colony of burrowing petrels. And here on Maui, the uaukani are a really good example that you can see along our seashores. And this diagram kind of shows how deep and extensive these burrows can be. So in altering the physical environment, the seabirds will change the landscape structure and the vegetation structure, and even can be responsible for a lot of soil homogenization when there's a lot of burrows. But perhaps not as obvious as the physical changes are the biochemical effects that seabirds have. So they alter the biochemical environment by transporting marine nutrients into the terrestrial environment. And they can do this through eggs and their carcasses, but mainly this comes through the deposition of seabird poop or guano. So recently they've estimated that seabirds bring 591 million kilograms of nitrogen and 99 million kilograms of phosphorus per year into the terrestrial environment. And this diagram shows kind of how this, the typical pathway, how this is done. The seabirds forage for fish and other marine organisms. And sometimes their guano may fall into the sea, but usually they return to land and it's deposited in their habitat, in their breeding habitat. And it may fertilize the vegetation that's present there, or it can percolate into the soil or through surface runoff, enter into the nearshore habitat. On a more local scale, the quantity and the quality of nutrients that enter in the system through seabird guano will vary, and it's based on several different variables. So seabirds can come in all shapes and sizes. And so first of all, the larger the seabird is, typically the more nutrients that are going to be deposited. But also the colony size and density matters. So sometimes the colony can be kind of patchy. So you can see on this top picture, each of these seabird, this is looking down from above, and each of their nests is surrounded by a little guano patch. But some species can be right on top of one another, so the nutrient input can be greater. And also the feeding range plays a lot in the quality of the guano. So as Jay was talking about for the uau, they have a really extensive feeding range, and the accumulation of the different prey items can lead to higher nutrient level in their guano. So the nutrient quality of the guano plays an important role in the natural environment, but it is also known in the agricultural world. If you just went onto Google and searched for seabird guano, you would find this. It's a lot of advertisements to buy seabird guano as fertilizer. So not only is there really good nutrient content inside of the seabird guano, but it's also in a very labile and organic form. So it's already in a form that is readily taken up by plants, and it's easily dissolved. And I know I mentioned that the quality varies, but just on average, seabird guano composition is about 20% nitrogen, 12% phosphorus, 3% potassium, which are the really important plant nutrients. And then there's also a lot of calcium in guano and carbon and water as well. So this nutrient quality of seabird guano is something that has been known for thousands of years, in fact. And the word guano is derived from the word huanu, which is ketchen for dung or fertilizer. So in South American populations, thousands of years ago, they had recognized this and started harvests at around 2300 BCE. And mainly they had 3 species, which are called the guano birds of South America. It's the guanine cormorant here on the left, and the Peruvian booby on the right, and then also the Peruvian pelican. And so when they would find these seabird colonies and mine them for the guano, and they realized that by using that as fertilizer, they could grow crops in areas where they wouldn't have normally been able to do so otherwise. So this led to the spread of agriculture throughout more deserted areas. And then this spread of agriculture in turn led to the rise of the Incan Empire. And there's actually an Incan goddess of seabird guano, but unfortunately I wasn't able to find her likeness, an image of her likeness anywhere. So, but this rise of the Incan Empire also resulted, or part of this guano, the result of the guano harvest resulted in the first example of conservation law. So there were several different penalties that would be laid down for harassing birds off of their nests, because they realized the importance of protecting the birds and this resource. And in fact, the penalty for causing death to any guano bird was in fact death for you. So very extreme conservation law. In more recent history, guano became a highly sought after resource for fertilizer, but also for gunpowder. Guano harvest was a driving factor then for colonization and expansion and development. This picture on the left shows Chincha Island, which is one of the guano islands in Peru in 1865. There was a massive mining operation there, and the large ridge in the background is actually a huge guano deposit, and it's been systematically harvested or mined. And so eventually on most of these guano islands, the guano was depleted through all these mining operations. Today on Chincha Island, in fact, they have reestablished some of the guano mining. They do it in a more sustainable way. And in 1997, the Peruvian government put out an act to protect the seabird islands and the coastlines in a national reserve. And the guano that they harvest now is distributed to local farmers mostly, and a portion of it is exported. Another result of this, of when they found that guano was this incredible resource, was called guano mania in the US media. And it led to the US Guano Act of 1856. And the US Guano Act states that US citizens can possess any unclaimed island containing guano, and the US has the right to protect that militarily. And this resulted in 94 islands and eventually 66 territories by the year 1903. And in fact, the US Guano Act is still in existence, so it still exists on the books. But after many of these islands were depleted of the guano, and after the establishment of the Haber-Bosch process, which allows for fixation of nitrogen in the lab, a lot of this rush to find guano islands disappeared. But one result of the Guano Act was actually the Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument was established by President Bush around the islands, many of the islands that were claimed through the Guano Act. And President Obama expanded the reserve to 490,000 square miles of marine sanctuary. Another very interesting result of the US Guano Act came when the US military was seeking out islands for military bases and airstrips in the Pacific. So one of the caveats of that of the act was that the US had the right to protect guano islands militarily. So they used this and they searched for islands that they thought would be useful, and they settled on Howland and Baker Islands, or Uluku and Puaka'ilima, and Jarvis Island, or Paukeaho. And they decided, well, they approached Kamehameha schools and decided that they were going to send pairs of students out to these islands because they could only be claimed if they were occupied. So they decided to use the boys as colonizers, and they told the students that they would be collecting meteorological data and scientific specimens for the Bishop Museum, which they did, but they didn't tell them that they would be colonizers until they were actually on the boats headed towards the islands. So they had to keep it, was a very confidential secret mission. So the this occupation of colonizers on these islands lasted from 1935 to 1942. When the bombing started, 2 of the colonists were actually killed. But there were 102 members that formed the Hui Panala'au, and it is a group in order to recognize their service and this mission that they did for the US government. So just an interesting story I found while learning about seabird guano. So there's a lot of influence that seabirds and their guano has had in the past, but they can also play a major role and help for a sustainable future. One way is in ecosystem restoration. Right now in the Chagos Islands, they're doing a study because there are islands in this archipelago that have rats, and then there are islands that are rat-free. And on the islands that are rat-free, there's 760 times greater seabird density, and thus 251 times greater nitrogen input. And they're studying all sorts of things across the ecosystem to see how this nitrogen has an impact. So they go from the island to the nearshore reef and then out past the reef crests, and they measure the nitrogen content that is derived from the seabird guano in the soil and the vegetation, and then the sponges and the algae in the near reef flat, and then the algae, and then even the damselfish that are far off on the reef. And in all cases, the nitrogen content is higher around the islands that don't have rats and thus have more seabirds. So by tracking its pathway through this system, you can see how just the presence of the seabirds releases these nutrients throughout. And they've also been able to sort of investigate how the nitrogen and the nutrient input from seabirds can affect the coral reef. So around Fiji, they're growing corals, and the corals that are grown around islands with seabirds grow 4 times as fast when they grow around islands without seabirds. So all of this nutrient input into the nearshore waters helps the coral grow and maintain, which in turn helps protect the island. And here in Hawaii, around Oahu, they are also measuring nutrient content in the water itself, and then in the algae in the water around the offshore islets of Oahu. So around those islets, some of the islets have greater seabird density than others, and the ones with the greater amount of, the more seabirds have higher nutrients in the water and then also in the algae. So there's all this evidence that shows, yes, when the seabird is there, there's a lot more nutrients available for the environment and for the plants, and it leads to greater productivity. And here actually on Maui, we had the opportunity to sort of track this from the start and see how this impacts our local habitats. When a breeding colony of red-footed boobies, or showed up at Paualu Point out by Kenai. So this nesting colony just showed up in about 2018. There's already maybe 400 pairs or so by the following summer, and we continue to monitor it, and it's still growing. It's almost, we estimate maybe 1,000 breeding pairs now. So in the center photograph taken from the helicopter, all the white dots in the treetops are the boobies. And we saw all these birds just show up. They had never been nesting on Maui before, so we thought this is a great opportunity to see how this nutrient transfer can start. So Cecilia Frissinger was our Kupu AmeriCorps service member, and she got a grant to get these plant root simulator probes, they're called. And we installed them in the soil. The picture on the left here shows them buried in the soil. And we put them out at the grassland at Paualu, out here, and then under the trees where there were no birds, and then under the trees where there were birds, just to see what the guano deposition, how it impacted the soil. And we left the probes out for 1 month, and the probes measured mostly we were looking at the nitrogen and the phosphorus, but also other micronutrients were analyzed on the probes. And we did see what this graph shows in general is just that the further away you get from any plot with a bird, the lower the concentration of available phosphorus and nitrogen. So this is, of course, what we were expecting, but what this provides us now is this baseline, so we can continue to watch and see how this nutrient input affects this area that could be good for restoration. It's actually a wildlife sanctuary where we would like to put a predator-proof fence, or there are plans to put a predator-proof fence and do habitat restoration with native vegetation. So having seabirds present to restore the ecosystem gives you like a head start, basically. You have a running start there. But also there's a lot of evidence that shows that having a seabird colony present creates a reservoir of nutrients that can leach into the groundwater. So remember, this is a really labile form of nutrients, so it can get into the groundwater system. but it can also be transported by wind. So there are seabird colonies that are on cliff faces that actually fertilize inland habitats far inland due to all of the guano and the nutrients associated with it being blown across the landscape. So this is something that can have greater impacts at more widespread. And actually, if you stand at Paualu Point and you turn around and you look back up towards the mountains, just thinking about seabirds and the impacts they could have on our ecosystem and on our available nutrients for productivity across the island. We have all of this habitat on the slopes of Haleakala that what used to be home to thousands, maybe millions of seabirds. The ua'u, had burrows all up and down these slopes. Now they're restricted to breeding on the very tops of the mountains here and in certain pockets here and there at lower elevations. But this is all habitat that could be colonized by burrowing seabirds, which is really important in tropical islands because, a lot of with all the rain and the way that the structure of the rocks are, we lose a lot of nutrients very quickly. So, and this is actually something that people are talking about on a more global scale that, across the board, we need to think about how to keep our nutrients on the land, because right now, what this infographic shows is on the left. Right now, we lose so much of the nutrients that we add to our systems through runoff and river transport out to sea, and then it just sinks to the bottom of the sea where it can't be used. But by using natural systems, such as animals, they can transport and disperse these nutrients the way that they naturally should. So things like marine mammals and migrating fish can bring up these nutrients from the deep waters, and of course, especially seabirds bring those nutrients to land. So this is a great way to just, get the natural system going again. And if you think about it, but of course, one of the problems is that they estimate that 70% of the monitored seabird populations have been lost since 1950. So there's a big global decline, as well as with marine mammals and fish, of course. Seabirds are one of these taxonomic groups that are undergoing major decline. And if 70% have been lost, if you think about that number of 591 million kilograms of nitrogen that is being deposited now, just what that number could be like with that natural seabird nutrient transfer system. So I just wanted to talk really quickly about why we are losing seabird species at such a fast rate, and maybe some things we can do to help stop some of these threats. Seabirds are particularly vulnerable because they face threats on land and at sea. They utilize both of these worlds. So on land, they suffer habitat loss in their breeding habitats. They suffer from distraction from light via light pollution. So a lot of times they're coming back to their nests at night, and the chicks fledge at night, and the anthropogenic light at night can be very distracting. And invasive predators cause a lot of damage. Seabirds involved mostly on islands where they didn't have mammalian predators in that threat, so they don't really have the tools to defend themselves from that. And at sea, ocean plastic is a major concern for seabirds, and overfishing, which depletes their food stock, and also bycatch through different fisheries where the seabirds are just removed directly as bycatch. And of course, climate change exacerbates all of these things. But there are things that we can all do to help protect seabirds. First of all, if you eat seafood, make sure it's sustainably harvested. Also, reducing the use of all plastics will help keep them out of the ocean, and these things can help remove these threats from seabirds in the ocean. And also keep pets indoors or on a leash. Cats actually have a big impact on many bird species and bird populations worldwide. And also don't feed or support feral animal colonies. The feral animal colonies, are just a collection of very unhealthy animals, and they cause great imbalances to the ecosystem. So by keeping these predators off the landscape, we can go a long way in protecting our native species. And using dark sky friendly lighting is important. So dark sky friendly lighting is directed down or it's shielded, and you only use it when needed, and you choose longer wavelength or warmer lights. All these things will reduce light pollution, which is great for seabirds, but also other native species like bats and turtles and our coral reefs and pretty much everything across the board. So, and finally, by supporting conservation efforts, these sorts of impacts can go very far. So we work with all sorts of different conservation agencies on the islands we identify and protect critical habitats, and we lobby for important issues. For example, the Bill 21, which just is now under, they're taking comment, and it should reduce light pollution by providing ordinances for wildlife safe lighting. And also we educate communities. So through education is really the best way we have to tell these seabird stories and to get this information out there so that the community can feel that they have an involvement and they can be part of this, and then take advantage of all these wonderful things that the seabirds and the other native species have to offer. So that's all I have to say about seabirds. And I know this is all of our contact information, but I know we'll also have question and answer time. So thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Jenny and Jay. That I think it's just so fascinating and interesting, and I learn so much from you guys every time, every time I hear your presentation, or every time we connect. I may be frozen again. Can anybody hear me?
No, you're good.
We can hear you.
Okay. This HANA internet connection, we just get used to it. But yeah, that's so fascinating. So I want to just open it up for anybody who has a question. You can just post questions in the chat if you want to, or you can just unmute and just ask your questions. And I guess while we're waiting for anybody else to come on with a question, one thing is that I'd like to ask is just specifically for farmers and people who, farmers are sort of landscape managers and very interested in soil health. And is there anything specifically that, that farmers can do either to, to help promote seabird population health and recovery with, in their land management, uses of, types of, anyway, just, whatever might be especially relevant for farmers to know about this.
Well, I think to start with, all of those things that Jenny mentioned at the end of her talk are really important for everyone, not just farmers, but controlling your lights, controlling your pets, getting all so that the seabirds, where they can, have habitat that is safe for them to be in, and when they leave it, to not be distracted by lights. Seabirds used to nest all over our islands. So the habitats that we are now using for residences and for agriculture, all of that got started when the Polynesians arrived and became the Hawaiians. They changed the habitat, and that's the habitat that we have now. Hawaiians are people who did agriculture. They created lo'ikalo. They had areas where they brought all of the canoe plants that they needed to live. So we humans have changed the habitat dramatically since the seabirds were here. So now, as we're trying to restore seabird populations, we are not at all suggesting that we stop doing agriculture. We're going to keep doing that, and it will benefit agriculture by identifying areas where we can have seabirds. So that, as Jenny pointed out in her talk, those nutrients, although they may be laid down in one area, they travel through the water, through the air, and they will benefit. If we were ever so fortunate to have seriously large colonies that we could actually harvest guano and transport it, then that could be used by farmers. But in the actual agricultural fields, the areas where you're practicing agriculture, we cannot really have seabirds present there. So it's more a matter of nurturing the areas where they can be present.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. We have one question in the chat from Tommy. Have feral cat colonies resulted in reducing the feral cat populations?
Feral cat colonies are actually the opposite of reducing cat populations. With all the attempts at spaying and neutering feral cats, we still have reproductive cats around. So the colonies are very definitely not. The idea on Lanai, where they created a cat sanctuary where they collected all of the feral cats that they could find around town, did actually reduce the feral cat population in town. But that doesn't address the feral cats that have been feral for years and years out on the landscape, which are the ones that predate our seabirds. So we are working with and have recently engaged with a cat care group called the Good Cat Network, who are collecting cats, trapping them, socializing them, and then finding homes for them, many of those homes on the mainland. And that's one solution and we need to come up with many more, perhaps more sanctuaries patterned after the Lanai cat sanctuary. We just need a number of solutions to get them off the landscape. They not only predate our seabirds, but they are an obligate host for the parasite Toxoplasma gondii, which causes the disease toxoplasmosis. And that infects not only humans, but monk seals have died from it, nene. It's ubiquitous in the environment now, and we really need to move to doing the right thing for cats, getting them off the landscape, into people's homes, loved, protected, given veterinary care. I think there's a lot in the cat community of people trying to say, oh, we hate cats, which absolutely isn't true. Many, many of us have cats, but the idea is keep your cat indoors, give it an outdoor area that's contained, and walk it on a leash. I actually saw a woman a few months ago walking her cat on the leash on East Quiaha Road. It was really good to see that people actually are learning that you can do that, and they should be treated just like dogs.
We have some questions in the chat related to cats, and you kind of answered some of these, but you know, the difference between house cats and feral cats in terms of, you know, their impact. Is toxoplasmosis only in feral cats, or is that in house cats as well? Couple questions there.
Yeah, toxoplasmosis can be in any cat. The organism, the Toxoplasma gondii, must be run through a cat in order to reproduce. That's where its life cycle has to go. They're an obligate host, the cats are, for the parasite. But then once it comes out in their feces, those oocysts, the eggs from the organism, can live over a year in water, in seawater, in the soil, in the sand, and any other animal can pick it up. And then the organism will be and cause disease in many animals. It's especially bad for pregnant women. It can cause spontaneous miscarriage. And it's been shown in studies in Romania that people get mental illnesses from having this organism within them. So it's really something that by controlling the feral population, the cats that are just running wild, we can limit where it is. It will take a long time. I see that there's questions also about rat predation and cats being controlling rats. This is a big misconception that cats actually control rats. When we study predator-prey relationships, it's very clear that it's the prey that control the population of predators. The more pressure there is from a predator on a prey population, the more the prey population will expand to fill the need. Coyotes are a really good example of that. Rats are a really good example. It's just, we need to have control measures that are not predators to control the introduced rat populations on the island as well.
Yes, very interesting. That's great information. And on that, before, there's another question on another subject, but just before we leave that one, is there a way to test for the toxoplasmosis?
There is. There's a test you can do, a blood test, to find whether you have it or not, whether your animals have it or not.
Okay. The other question we had, going back up to Glenn here, he said, how do you get your funding, and do you expect to have increasing funds in the future and greater monitoring and restoration efforts?
Well, Glenn Metzler, good to hear from you. It's been quite a while. Glenn used to work with us here. If you are the same Glenn, I presume, now on the mainland. We do get a good deal of our funding from DLNR DOFA. We get funding from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service through DLNR DOFA. We get county funding, and then we have a variety of private sources, and we're always looking for additional funding. Long-term funding, it would be the dream that we would love to realize, of getting secure funding so that we didn't have to spend quite as much time looking for funding all the time. But
anyway,
yeah,
it is me.
Your story.
It is me, Jay.
Go ahead.
It is me, Jay, and I'm actually on the Big Island now. It's where I live.
Hi, Glenn. Well, good to hear you back there.
Any other questions? Anybody is welcome to just, unmute and chime in if you have something to ask, or post it in the chat. What are your sort of the next projects that you have, or the priorities that you have in the near future that you think are the sort of most important, where you're putting your focus on in terms of sanctuaries or research?
One of our really big projects that we're looking at really trying to do more with is actually one that you, Scott, have been a part of with the Ke'aohali'i property purchase, is looking at areas where we can install predator-proof fences. And I think it's important for everyone to realize that when we're talking about predator-proof fences, and Jenni mentioned the one at Paualu Point, we are not talking about fences that fence out people. People will be allowed, should encouraged to come into these areas and be able to carry out traditional activities. If we fence Paualu Point, the people fishing there can still walk through the gate closes behind them. That keeps the cats and rats and mongoose and pigs out from the sanctuary area, and the people can go down to the cliff edges and fish.
And hopefully there's more fish because the birds are there.
Exactly. And that's something too that I think some people who fish think, oh no, the birds are eating our fish. And actually, most all of these birds that are here, you saw the foraging patterns in the slides that I showed, they're fishing far away from the island. They're not fishing right in the nearshore habitat where we people are fishing. And those birds are also leading people to where the big predator fish, the aku, the ahi, are pushing up the bait fish that the seabirds eat. So the seabirds are all around a good thing for the fish, for the people. So in addition to the area that Ke'aohali'i has, we're looking at Pawalu Point. We have an area that the Hawaii Land Trust has at Waihe'e Dunes, areas that we could encourage birds to come to with social attraction. That's putting out decoys and artificial burrows and playing the calls of the birds to attract them to come nest there. And also to bring birds, translocate them from Papahanaumokuakea, where their habitat is disappearing. There have already been significant areas that birds used to nest that have disappeared because of storms and rising sea levels. So we need to provide those areas here. That work has already been going on Oahu. Our nonprofit sponsor, Pacific Rim Conservation, has translocated Ka'upu from the Northwest Islands, Papahanaumokuakea, to Oahu. They have brought the Tristram storm petrel. And they will be doing a number of other species as well. And then they will move to trying to bring birds into areas that we have here. There's a predator-proof fence going up on Molokai on the North Shore at Mokio. And there's a social attraction project for Moli there already. So that's a major push that we're going to be part of and will be looking to do more of. We, a couple of years ago, took over the management of the seabird enclosures at Makamaka'ole. These were built for mitigation for birds that were killed by the wind facility at Kahiava Pastures. And they built that and then put in artificial burrows, put in a sound system to attract ua'u and a'o. And a'o were actually successfully attracted and are now breeding in there. Last year, we had the first chick fledge from there. And these birds take 5 to 6 years to mature, to become sexually mature and return to that same colony to breed. So we banded that chick when it left, as we will with any more that leave there. And we will really know success when that bird is seen coming back and breeding in the colony there. We have enough birds breeding in that colony now that we've turned off the a'o broadcast system because they provide enough of their own calling. Unfortunately, we have not gotten any ua'u to nest in there yet. In the early years, they came down and checked out the burrows, but something wasn't right for them and they didn't stay. So it's possible after Lanai gets their predator-proof enclosure completed and they have birds safely reproducing in that portion of the colony, that we could take some of the chicks before they fledge from there, because a couple of weeks before they fledge, they come out of the burrow and they look up at the sky and they learn the stars and they get their magnetic compass oriented and they exercise so that they know where to come back to 5 or 6 years later, which they do. So if you take them out of their burrow before that time and feed them for the last part of their growing, then they will come back to the place where you're feeding them. This has been successfully done on Kauai and many other places, but that's a local place that because the populations there are really threatened, both of a'o and ua'u. Their populations have declined dramatically over the last 20 years. And so getting them into predator-free protected areas where they don't have light distraction and they don't fly into wires to get there is really important. So right in at the National Wildlife Refuge at Kilauea, there is that site now, and all of Kilauea is now being protected by a predator-proof enclosure.
All right, there's a lot of projects going on, and the one question we have from Lily is, do you take volunteers to help with these projects? And what could somebody who doesn't have any special expertise do that's hands-on to support your work?
We do take volunteers. The one hands-on activity with birds is the Uaukani study that we're doing. So in the fall, we take the chicks out of the burrows and put bands on them. And we always have, or we did before COVID, and we will again after, have volunteers to help. So you have one bander who is all trained to do that, and one grabber, which is a fairly easy thing to learn how to do to get the bird. And then you have a data recorder. And we travel around in these little groups of 3, banding all the chicks we can in 3 colonies on Maui and 1 on Molokai. Actually 2 now, because Uaukani have started breeding at Mokio last year. And then the other volunteer work that we have that we really encourage people to participate with us in is habitat restoration. The grasses and kiawe, they're all really bad for the birds. We regularly get, and on Lanai it's even worse, of Uaukani flying in and getting hung up on the thorns of the kiawe. And then they just dangle there by a wing or, you know, some body part. So we are working on doing that in several colonies here, removing the kiawe, removing the grasses, and then planting out native coastal strand habitat plants, which are the ones that the birds really need to have around them to have a decent life in their colony. The grasses especially hide the cats and the mongoose, so that they just live in tunnels in the grasses, and the birds just come to their burrows and the cats grab them. Before we cleared at Akama Ole 3 Beach Park, the grasses there, one time we found 29 banded bands in one location where the birds had just been killed by the cats. And just they don't eat the bands, of course. They actually eat a lot of the bones, but we find legs with bands still on them.
Manuel asks about the, can you share more information about the impetus for the BOEM funding for nests out of Ho'okipa?
Yeah, that study actually I just showed those 2 sites. We also did that from Kamaole 3 Beach Park, and it was done on Oahu and Kauai, and it was actually done for more species. They did the red-footed booby, and a couple of other ones on other islands. And it very definitely was, BOEM was funding it because they want to know what will be the risks if we do offshore wind development. Is this an area where the birds are? And by showing that the birds are foraging in these areas, that would be a strike against using that for a location for an offshore wind generator or some other type of generator that might impact the wildlife in that area.
All right, thank you. Well, it's a few minutes till 8, and so almost time to wrap up, but is there anything last important message or parting words that you want to share before we wrap up?
Well, I just like to thank everybody for doing it, and thank the Hawaii Farmers Union United for all the work you do. I know my wife is actually a member and has worked with a number of you in different roles, and I really support the work of you guys that are farming and actually raising food for we here on the island, more than just lemons and limes and oranges and coffee. I'm really glad to see that Hawaii Farm Workers Union is out there raising food for us.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm also really grateful. I think, you know, we do a lot of this work, and sometimes we're out monitoring, and we just end up, we're gathering all this information and we're gathering all these data, but it's great to share it with different audiences. Sometimes, there's more connections here on the island, I think, than we tend to think of all the time. So being able to speak to this group was really a great experience, and we'd just love to share and continue to share. So if anybody has any ideas or would like to, get us to spread the word elsewhere, I put the email address up in the chat, so you can get in touch with us. And yeah, and we're happy to have any help. So any ideas or any help you want to contribute, just get in touch.
All right. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Jay. And thank you everybody for coming and just listening in and asking your good questions. And I hope that you find it as fascinating as I do, and just have a increased sense of the importance of seabirds. I think that we just take them for granted. A lot of people just don't really know, don't know this information. It's really important to get it out. And just remember that all the soil in Hawaii is seabird poop. So keep that in mind while you're out there raising your crops. Give appreciation to thanks for all the millions of years of seabirds that help to create all of the soils that feed us every day, our aina. So with that, mahalo everybody for joining us.